Before reading any of these stories, I would like to thank the authors for sharing them with me. And of course, a thank you to you as well, my dear viewer. Please enjoy. My grandfather told me the hills were haunted. I did not believe him at first. You should sleep over. You know how these hills are during nights, my grandfather urged. Yes, I know. Drag effect's gonna get me to eat my teeth, right? I get no reply from Grandpa, only a flat stare. We spent a day cutting and preparing firewood at his house, located in a remote village of South Serbia. With gloomy hills all around, work took us a bit more time than we expected, allowing an early autumn evening to creep up on us. I'll be able to catch a bus, don't worry, Gramps. If I head out right now, that is. You're probably right, and nowadays there are streetlights to help you feel safer anyway. Yeah, from Baba Roga, it's gonna eat my toes, right? I know you like to make fun of it, but you wouldn't laugh if you saw what I saw. What did you see? No time to tell you anyway. Go ahead, you're gonna miss the bus. I looked over. The sun was slowly setting behind tired hills. I don't visit him that often, let alone sleep over, so a sense of guilt washed over me as I looked over at him sitting on a little wooden chair he made, drinking a bit of his favorite brandy. I didn't believe his stories, but I figured he could have used some company. He has lived alone ever since my grandmother died a few years back. Maybe this was his way of getting me to stay. So I sighed and said, "If I stay over, will you tell me the story?" His lips curved into a smile, but his eyes remained dull, as if only a part of him wanted to tell me a story. Sure. Let your father know while I pour you some brandy too. You're gonna need it. I quickly called my father while Grandpa got inside the house, bringing out a bottle and something else. A smaller empty bottle covered in dust, as if it hadn't seen the light of day in a very long time. He poured me a glass too. We cheered and we crossed ourselves in orthodox Christian manner, as it was a custom in this region. What's that about? I asked, nodding to the dusty bottle. This? It's proof of my story. It's the only reason why I don't go out in these hills during the night, and that I don't want you to go out either. Tell me, son, what do you know about the history of this place? Of the village? Not much. Of this whole region, I meant. The hills and mountains. I don't know. Well, under Ottoman rule, there were a lot of skirmishes here during the war. Our ancestors and Ottomans fought each other, often stripping each other's corpses of weapons or anything of value, for that matter, as resources were scarce. War was ongoing, so there was no time for funerals. Bodies were left to rot in the middle of the woods, and it is believed their restless spirits still haunt these hills. Chills ran down my spine. Even though I did not believe in unnatural things, I read about these events in history, and for the most part they were correct. Slavic forces and Ottomans often had several battles here hundreds of years ago. When I was young, maybe a bit older than you, I was getting back from the town on foot. I went there to sell a bag of tobacco I harvested on the market. Your generation is so lucky not to have to do any of that. It is a long walk, and the night caught up with me. I had some luck to have a bit of moonlight here and there, otherwise it would have been pitch black. Several kilometers away though, I started hearing music out of nowhere. For what I could gather, it seemed I ran into a wedding. A wedding? In the middle of the night? In these hills? Yes, exactly. Just as the cloud started covering the moon, I cut the corner, and right there in the field there were about 20 to 30 people from what I could gather. As I could only see their silhouettes, I found it weird too. People in the middle of a cold night, out in the nowhere. But for some reason at that moment, it just made sense to me. One of the men started walking towards me, telling me they are celebrating and offering a drink to me. The last trace of a smile left my grandfather's face, and his voice became dead serious. I was hesitant at first, but the stranger insisted.
It was a cloudy night, and I had to walk a bit more to my home, so I thought, why not? I could use a drink. And so I took the bottle he was offering. He turned to me, a grave expression on his face. Tell me now, son, what did we do before we emptied these glasses? He gestured to 2 empty glasses in front of us. I stared at them blankly for a few moments before remembering. We crossed ourselves? Right, and so did I back then. See, it is not just a custom. By crossing yourself before you drink, you are calling the Spirit of God to you to drive away evil. I know it sounds silly, but we've been doing this for centuries now. Before I drank back then, I instinctively crossed myself. As soon as I did it, it was like I had woken up, like I had been pulled out of a dream, or a nightmare for that matter. Music stopped, people disappeared, and the scariest part is, I was not even in that field.
Where were you?
I found myself on the edge of a bridge, as if I was getting ready to jump down right where the rocks and the river are. I'm sure this was the devil or some restless spirit way of tempting me into harming myself, and crossing myself was a divine intervention. That is why I never walked over these hills during the night again. Do you know how I know I was not dreaming, and it was all real?
Grandpa finally asked.
How? Everything else disappeared, but when I finally got back to myself on the bridge, this was still in my hand,
he said, lifting a dusty old bottle. 2 nights my dad and I will never forget. We still talk about it every now and then, some 20 years later. This happened all when I was about 10 years old. It was always known to my family that previous family who lived in my childhood home before us had a daughter who sadly passed away from cancer at a very young age. She did not pass away in the house, but rather in a local hospital. I had gotten really weird vibes in the house, but only while I was in the basement. I grew up in the house from 3 to 18. My basement had a little makeshift basketball court in it, and I would shoot hoops nightly down there. We had a huge black stereo that I would use to listen to music while shooting hoops. For some reason, every single time that I had gotten done shooting hoops, I would absolutely storm up the stairs of the basement and refuse to look into this particular corner of it because I always had that feeling like I was being watched by something or someone, that feeling. So much to the point that I had convinced myself that if I were to look into that corner while walking up the stairs, I would see someone standing there. One night after shooting hoops, I went upstairs and got into bed to get ready to go to sleep. My dad and I lay down at the exact same time in separate rooms. Within minutes of lying down, my dad came knocking on my door and told me that I had forgotten to turn the stereo off. I was confused and had no idea what he was talking about because I know I did. He said, "The stereo is absolutely blaring." And so he went downstairs into the basement and the stereo was blaring in the pitch black darkness. The story only continues from here, as for about a week later, maybe not even, I got done shooting more hoops again and laid into bed. And as I laid in bed, I started hearing what sounded like bouncing. I could hear the noise coming through the vent in the corner of my room. I put up my ear to the vent and all of a sudden I understood what I was hearing and froze. My basketball was dribbling. I ran into my dad's room. He put up his ear to the vent and heard the exact same thing. He went downstairs to the basement and this time it was still and quiet. No sound, no dribbling, just darkness. That vent in the corner of my room was directly over the corner of the basement that I had always gotten super weird vibes from. To this day, my dad and I would joke about it every now and then, but it's something we both will never, ever forget, permanently etched into our memories and minds for the rest of our lives, that's for sure. I don't know what this was. I was 12 years old, and to this day I still think about it. I never really told the full story publicly, but it's been stuck in my head like it just happened last night. My bedroom was the smallest in the house. A box room, basically. If you walked in, the window was directly opposite to the door, and my bed was tucked away in the far right corner. The wall beside me had no window, just solid plain plaster. One night, around 1 a.m., I woke up and glanced towards that wall, and that's when I saw it. A shadow window. There was no actual window in that wall, but I could see one, like the outline of a window projected in total shadow. And within the silhouette, I saw what looked like a shadow boy dart across and disappear behind what looked like a shadow shed. I was frozen. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I could move, I just didn't. Eventually, I ducked under the blanket the way a kid does when they want to disappear. Not a full cover, just enough to hide my face. I remember my knuckles sticking out, holding the blanket tight to my eyes. Then I heard it, whistling, right near my hand. And worse, I felt it, like someone was whistling directly onto my knuckles. I could feel the breath, warm and real. I stayed frozen for what felt like 10 seconds. Then panic hit me like lightning. I threw the blanket, kicked at the air, bolted out of bed, and ran screaming to my parents' room. I was banging on their door, yelling, "Please open, please open!" Same with my sister's room. All the doors were locked. I was crying, full on shaking. When they finally opened up, I could barely get the words out. Someone was in my room, whistling on my hand. No one had an explanation. A week later, it only got worse. It was around 2 a.m. I had left my window open slightly for air, and I woke up to the most chaotic, unnatural mix of sounds. I heard a car crash, a horn blaring, someone screaming, then laughter. But not just a normal laugh, it kept going, on a loop like something broken. I thought I was dreaming, but I sadly wasn't. I got up and went to my sister's room. I asked, "Can you hear this?" And she looked at me pale and said, "Yes, I can't hear everything." It didn't stop until around 5 a.m. Just when the sun started to rise, the laughter faded, but then we both heard a baby crying in our garden, loud, sharp, like a real baby, but there was no one there. We looked out the window, trying to find the source. We even whispered down at the garden like idiots, "Baby, don't cry. It's okay. Don't cry." But the crying only got louder and louder and louder. I don't know what came over me, but I went inside. It was still dark, cold winter morning. I stepped into the garden slowly. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, fast, running through the little shared walkway behind the garden. The kind that separates everyone's fences. I didn't wait. I slammed the garden door shut and ran back inside. I never had a full explanation for what happened that week. No one talks about it anymore, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt on my hand. Back in 2016, I went on a family vacation with my dad, his wife, and my aunt. We traveled through several places in Morocco, just enjoying the road trip. One day, we had a very long drive to Agadir, a touristy spot in southern Morocco known for its beach, shops, restaurants, and beautiful boulevard. We drove for about 12 hours and arrived later in the evening. Everyone was tired except for me. While the others went to bed, I decided to head out to the boulevard and enjoy a drink, relaxing in the warm summer evening breeze. My dad told me to knock on the door when I got back, and he would open it for me. As I was sitting there, drinking and enjoying the night, I started to feel something unexplainable. It felt like something was about to happen, but I shrugged it off, thinking I was just tired. Around 3 a.m., I decided it was time to head home and get some sleep. I took a cab back and knocked on the door. My dad opened it. Now, my dad always greets me the same way. He says, "Hi, son," whenever it's in person, on WhatsApp or on a phone call. He stood there in the doorway and said, "Hi, son. How was it?" I told him it was fine, but that I was ready for bed. He nodded and said yes. As I walked inside, I faintly heard from behind me in the hallway, "Hi, son." I didn't think much of it. I figured I was just hearing things because I was so tired. So I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth. My aunt and I were sharing the same bedroom. She was sleeping in the bed by the window, and I was in the bed against the wall. When I walked toward the room and tried to enter, I suddenly felt a strong force push against my chest, as if something was trying to stop me from going in. I was startled and stepped back, but I shrugged it off. When I tried to enter the room a second time, I felt the same push, but since I had convinced myself that it was just because I was tired, I ignored it and went to bed. Once I was lying down, I fell asleep, but it felt like I was still awake. Within about 5 minutes, all the lights in the room turned on. I couldn't move, and I heard strange noises coming from my aunt's bed. I tried with all my strength to look in her direction, but I couldn't move a muscle. Then I heard her call my name and tell me to look. I managed to turn my head slightly. What I saw terrified me. Blood was streaming down from her eyes. She was holding a knife, and she screamed that she was going to kill me. I never in my entire life felt fear like that. I was shouting and begging her to stop, when all of a sudden I heard my dad's voice pleading with me to wake up. I remember thinking, wake up? I am awake. That was when I realized I was actually asleep, because his voice kept getting louder and more urgent. I tried my best to snap out of it, and eventually I did. When I finally woke up, my dad was sitting behind me, holding me up and trying to comfort me. His wife looked shocked. My aunt was sitting on her bed, pale as a ghost, with her head between her knees. I was still overwhelmed by extreme fear, but also completely disoriented. The fear was so intense and present that I rushed to the toilet to throw up. Afterwards, my dad told me that we were leaving the house first thing in the morning. When I returned to the room, my aunt still looked completely drained and unusually pale. I asked her what had happened, and she said she had a bad dream too. I asked her what she had dreamt. She told me she saw red everywhere, had a knife in her hand, and an overwhelming urge to kill me. We left the house and never came back.